Okay, well, hi everybody, and welcome to the Jazz and Heritage Center. This is another edition of our Sync Up series of monthly workshops for the music and entertainment industry. As you know, tonight is the panel on playlists, podcasts, and radio. And we have a great panel. We have two presenters tonight. We have John Hammond and Adam Lewis, and they have both traveled from very far to be here, so we're very grateful to them for being here. As you know, the Jazz and Heritage Foundation is the nonprofit organization that owns the Jazz Fest, and our role is to use the money from Jazz Fest for all of the free year-round programs that we do in education, economic development, and cultural enrichment. And so we like to do these workshops on the music business, and we also do quarterly events for the film industry that we call Sync Up Cinema. The next one is going to be on November the 9th. So check out our website, syncupconference.com, or just go to jazzandheritage.org, and you can stay up to date with all of the different events that we do. But today's panel on playlist podcasts, is it podcast playlists? Podcast playlists and radio. And just to give you a brief setup on how we came up with this topic, probably about 2 years ago, I posted a question on Facebook asking New Orleans musicians, or any musicians really, basically whether they were on Spotify. And I got over 100 responses saying, Spotify sucks, man. Don't go on Spotify. They're not paying artists. You're selling out. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Well, 2 years later, all of those artists are now on Spotify, and the one thing that they want to know is how do they get on one of those nifty playlists that are on the Spotify homepage. And more recently, I personally have become a bit more aware of this whole phenomenon of the podcast, which most people, of course, now are aware is basically radio on the internet. I suppose there's more to it than that, and which you guys can enlighten us about that. But it's a big mystery to many people. How do you access it? How do you get on it? How do you leverage it to benefit your career? And while we were talking about it, we figured that we might as well talk about good old-fashioned terrestrial radio as well, because I think the question could rightly be asked, does radio even matter anymore with the demise of the sales of recorded music, with the proliferation and even downloads of recorded music, and the proliferation of streaming audio services that now everybody is on? Is there really room, especially for independent artists who make different styles of music as opposed to just pop or just hip hop? Is there a place for them on the radio? And is it still an important piece of the puzzle in putting together a career in music? So we invited these two gents to come and talk to you because they both have very, very long experience working in a variety of marketing capacities in the music industry, in radio, in publicity, in promotion, but also in managing artists and producing events, working for record labels, trying to sell recorded music, and in general, just extensive experience in helping new artists, especially, break into the marketplace and achieve the next steps in their career, which is what we're all interested in. So I'm going to ask John Hammond to give the presentation that he has kindly prepared for tonight's workshop, and I'm just going to let you run with it, and then if we have questions, we'll talk about that. We may schmooze a bit on some of the items that you bring up, and then we will bring Adam into the conversation, and we'll talk in more depth about radio specifically. So, John,
Right.
Take it away.
Thank you, Scott. And thanks for putting this together. It's great to come back to my hometown and actually connect with the industry, because I've been bugging this guy for a while about what's going on down there. Are things developing? Are there good artists? Are people breaking out of the New Orleans scene, or is it still very self-contained? Because, I came up here, 30 years ago. I was doing radio. I was trying to pay attention to everything that was happening all over the world, and yet there was still, this great scene here, which nobody else seemed to know about. And when I went to college and I went to New York, and people just didn't really have a feel for what was going on down here. And so I would love to help move that needle a bit over time. So that's why I appreciate doing this and meeting with folks. So Scott mentioned, I think it's mostly artists who are here, and that's really what the series is geared to. All of this list of resources is kind of geared towards artists for what you can do yourself. There are slight variations that labels can do and distributors, but the funny thing is it's all the same function, no matter where you are in the food chain. We're all still doing the same stuff, which is trying to, create awareness and create excitement and get music heard and get it heard by more people. So just as far as background, so the company I'm with is called Missing Piece Group. We're based in New Jersey. A good friend of mine started it almost 10 years ago, and I joined on to head up the marketing side and the digital side. We're designed to kind of, there's a reason why we're called Missing Piece Group. We can kind of plug in wherever. We do a lot of work with labels, and we're on retainer with Blue Notes and Universal's Catalog Group and BMG for kind of, whatever artists and projects come through. But it's just as much fun to work with independent artists. A couple of the guys here, that's August Green on the left, which is Common, and Kareem Riggins and Robert Glasper, and we work with them through their album release, and they're doing TV in a month, and that's great. Belly, who are a kind of one of the biggest alternative kind of breakthrough bands in that original alternative era. Adam and I probably saw them in the 90s a few times. They reformed, they made a great album with their original producer. They got back together with their same agent, and otherwise they had no team whatsoever. And they kind of came to us and said, can you help us with this release? Which is super gratifying that people can view the company as being able to plug in wherever. We help them, we set up their distribution deal with the Orchard, and then we managed their release. And we debuted their album at number 25 on the albums chart, for whatever that means. It meant it sold some albums in the first week of release and beyond. So that was very cool. We do have a management company as well. I manage one artist based in Nashville. Michael, who owns a company, we're managing Chris, who was in Fountains of Wayne, and a few other Nashville guys, and then we do have a record label as well. And as I say, it's still all the same functions, no matter who's doing it. We're all trying to do the same thing. So it kind of depends on, are people paying us for the services that month, or do we have some kind of a back end deal? It's kind of a hybrid every time, which is fun and challenging, and we always need to roll with the changes in the industry, and that's kind of why we're here today, to talk about all those topics. So to put this in context, I don't know if you guys can read this. See that big orange slice of the pie? Slice, 3/4 of the pie. That's, this came out mid-year. This is first half of 2018 revenues for the US music industry, and that big piece of orange is 75% of those revenues are now coming from streaming music, which kind of blew my mind, and I didn't realize that it happened that fast. And I was at Sony about 10 years ago when iTunes went from we're the number 4 account for them, and they came to be the number 1 account during that about 5-year period, when that sort of first digital transition. If you talk about digital music being available on the internet, to being bought on the internet, to now being streamed on the internet. Those have been kind of the big turns, really. But so let's talk about how this has evolved, and let's talk about how everybody needs to respond to it. And what that really means is understanding who there is in this market. It can be a full-time job to keep up with the developments in digital music. You know, when I was putting this presentation together last week, these were the two big headlines in streaming music. And this was a great one. This was kind of an illustration. The two pieces on the left are Apple buys this company, and then 2 hours later, maybe, TechCrunch's headline was, no, they didn't buy this company. They hired these guys who started the company, or something like that. And Asahi is one of these, you know, monitoring services where, you know, you can tap into the back end of these digital companies, and you can kind of track trends, see what's happening, and they're selling themselves as, we can flag artists that are going to break before they break, which is, you know, interesting. It certainly, you know, if you're head of A&R at Universal Music, you want to have that kind of safety net to have something like that. You know, for those of us who are running little labels or, you know, working with independent artists, you know, it could kind of be debatable about what the value of something like that is. But it just kind of, it cracked me up that everything is always moving very fast in this space. And, you know, certainly, again, when I was at Sony, I hate to keep coming back to that because that's 3 years of a 30-year career being in one of the majors, and the rest of the time has all been independent labels. And the other key point, the other slide, the Spotify slide, is a really interesting move, which is, you know, you guys may have seen, they announced a few weeks ago, we're setting up this service where artists can just feed content directly into our system. You don't need to go through what's called an aggregator, or essentially a distributor. You know, all these companies are basically pipes. You can pay $30 and put your music through DistroKid or TuneCore, and then somebody wants to disrupt that market and you can do it for $2.99 or whatever. Or you can do a partnership where you're giving them 15% and supposedly they're working more for you. Spotify wants to own a piece of that process as well. So they have invested in this company, DistroKid, which not only will feed into Spotify, but will feed into everybody. You know, you guys may know this, it still blows my mind since I've been around so long. You know, we could make a track tonight and release it tonight, and it would be available, certainly by tomorrow. We worked with one very EDM label, which is very big in that world, and having come out of a more traditional background, we talked to their distributor of like, how much lead time do you need? What, 2-3 weeks? He said, no, I can get stuff overnight, it's fine, you know, and I can get them in those playlists overnight as well. So again, it's just kind of understanding what that process is. So what that means, and the Spotify move especially, is what can artists do, and what should all of you guys be doing? The funny thing is, you come to a panel like this, you see an article from like this one from AWOL in your Facebook feed of like, you know, 6 tips to get on these playlists. And, you know, people are looking for, you know, tell me how people can find my music and how do we get it out there. The actual answers to that, it turns out to be, well, these are all the things you need to do. These are all the ways that you need to keep your own presence well managed and well maintained, in hopes that your music will bubble up. So really, let's dig into what are some of these key resources. These are technology companies. They're not music companies. These guys aren't the same as Tower Records. Tower Records was, you know, again, is something we lived through. Those were like guys who loved records and wanted to sell them and make money. And I do look back a little idealistically and a little nostalgically about them. These guys are technology companies, and they're interested to maximize the revenue on their bigger releases. You know, if they get more streams than those other guys, they make more money. But artists are the providers. You know, without the artists, those companies have no product. to monetize. So they're interested in creating these technological tools that artists can tap into. I'm going to touch mainly on the commercial services where one theoretically gets paid a certain amount. One does get paid a certain amount. We don't need to get into the royalties discussion too much, but there are certainly promotional avenues as well. SoundCloud purports to be a commercial service, but they're really a free streaming service. A lot of hip hop is, there is a very well thought of genre known as SoundCloud rap, which is where hip hop is coming from and is bubbling up right now. But I want to focus more on the main commercial services. Spotify for Artists is kind of the OG in this world. They have put these tools together first. There's a URL on there which I think says artist.spotify.com. If you have released music commercially on Spotify, you can go and claim your account and your presence, and you can plug into these tools right now. None of this is
Even if you go through a distributor like TuneCore or DistroKid?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. They can, if nothing else, they can. I think if you log on to artist.spotify.com, you can claim that account. You may need to work through that distributor the first time, but again, I want to emphasize. Not secret, not proprietary. This is open to everyone. Some of our companies who've been in this business for a while, we happen to have relationships with these providers. We were discussing yesterday, when did you meet that guy who does the rock playlists? That's theoretically an advantage that we have, but these tools are kind of meant to blow that shit up and to just to let you submit, be considered, work on a meritocratic basis, right? Is that a word, Mr. Ryder? And have your music reach the ears that it deserves to reach. Again, you're working through editors. They are listening and making decisions about music. So it's not all algorithmically based. You're still hoping that people who are paid to have opinions about music will like your music and will therefore position it well. But the better you can build everything around it, the better positioned the music is, if that makes sense. So on Spotify for Artists, you can clean up your profile. You can put up your artist image. You can place an artist's pick, which is, I'm psyched I'm on that playlist, so I'm going to send my listeners to that playlist. Or I'm on tour. I just announced a tour today. Here's the link to that. You can plug directly to your merch offerings. You can link up direct tour dates. And as of now, you can also submit music directly into the consideration channel to where it will be heard by editors. This tool is in your hands. Please use it wisely. Don't say, here's my new single, isn't it great? I hope you dig it. These guys want to know what the story is. I worked radio for a long time as an independent label person. I did press early on. Everybody wants to know what else is the story, what else is happening with the project. We used to joke about radio that everybody in radio wants to be the first guy to add your record the week that everybody adds your record, right? Yeah. So when you're submitting through this service about here's the what the one track I'd like you guys to focus on for my upcoming album, tell us the story about it. What are you doing for and that's both musical and kind of marketing wise. What are your tour plans? Are you going to do online advertising? Are you going to do online advertising pointing to Spotify? I would suggest people do that, and if you do it, please make sure they know about that, because People want to hear about that. The game plan on Spotify, which is the second clip pick on here, is it's a series of videos on this artist's portal, and it's a great series of ideas and understand the network and hear some things that other artists are doing to kind of go above and beyond putting music out, telling their fans about it, tweeting a link, because they want to see other ideas coming through as well. Apple Music for Artists also exists. I believe that's artists. What does that say? Artists.apple.com? Okay, I think that's right. This is not as fully built out. You can't really create or manage anything here. You can't really manage your profile, but this is great information. Where's my music streaming? Is it in playlists? What cities is it streaming strongly in? Is it getting more pickup from radio versus direct streaming from listeners? Certainly something to explore. I don't believe this is open to everyone yet. I think they're still in beta, so you kind of have to apply to be considered, but it's very valuable info. YouTube for Artists is this big honkin' network, and it's funny because the dreaded influencers that have come up the last 5 years or so of I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I understand a lot about the YouTube phenomenon through her eyes, and see, she follows all these 17-year-old kids who are vloggers, and to YouTube, these guys are all creators. These guys are all posting videos that they want to generate views on, which they can sell ads against, whether you're the 17-year-old vlogging in your bedroom, or whether you're somebody who has hired a 4-camera crew to shoot a 3-day concert at Red Rocks. It's kind of all the same with these guys, but whatever, hey. But so they're focusing on creators, and there are so many tools and resources and things to understand here. Some of them are very valuable to musicians. Personally, I think it's a little cheesy when you're saying subscribe to my feed here, which, you see these video people doing, fine, but there are things that musicians need to consider, again, keeping your house in order. One thing they've been asking for this year, which is interesting and kind of understandable, but I had never really thought about it until they mentioned it, is put lyrics in the description text. Because ideally, you want to have one of those songs where people are searching what's that song, God Bless the American Kid? I want to find that, even if you don't know the name of it. That if you're coming up in search results and people are clicking to your video, then the algorithm is going to tell the other algorithm oh, there's buzz on this video, which means that it's going to have a better chance of getting placed next to a great video from another band. On YouTube, if you just let it play, it's going to play, and it's going to play your music. And it's a little black box of understanding how those things get chosen, what those robots are actually thinking of. But the more, and this is general with all of these services, the better you are at kind of, creating all the good, optimizing all your profiles and making sure that things come up in search results and understanding what are the terms people are searching, the better you can help the video automatically, the more it's going to pop up when people are saying what are some new developing jazz artists? What videos are actually getting searched? And then they'll plug them into playlists as well. Pandora. Interesting that they've kind of started to launch these as well. And don't sleep on Pandora. It's, the money's not amazing, but it's a very large network. It has a lot of listeners. You will connect with artists. And it's a nice thing, you can connect directly with them. The AMP platform, the artist messaging platform, you can do two things. It's a nice tight platform. project. Sorry, I keep using that word. But there's two major like campaigns you can build. One is you can denote a track. Like, I want this to be a really, aggressively promoted track of mine, which means it's going to come up more frequently in other searches. And you're agreeing to kind of take less royalties on the track by submitting it for that program. But, look, it's all about finding listeners, and it's all about connecting with an audience. And the other thing you can do is create an audio message before or after one of my songs. I have Dave Davies here as an example. We're working on his new album of historic music from the 70s, I guess. So I got Dave to record like, hi, this is Dave Davies from the Kinks. I have a new album of tracks that I recorded between 71 and 79. And that's going to come up within Dave Davies channels, within related artist channels, and I kind of have to work the editors to make sure it comes up in Kinks channels as well, because obviously that's where the listeners are, and that's what we're trying to do here. And we're trying to move people from listening to the Kinks to listening to Dave's music. Pandora also launched this tool this week. And again, you're at are you at artist.pandora.com? Or I think it's amp.pandora.com, which is, where are my streams coming from? Our songs are being played after these other artists, which has great use. And when you're really digging in, and when you're really kind of thinking of what is the marketing for the project, that's super useful information. What other artist audiences should I target through online advertising? Who should we pitch to tour with? Look, I just got 6.1 million streams of my song coming out of your artist's song, and that's great information that you can send to the artist's agents or the artist manager. And again, this is kind of a key global factor, is all this information is great, and there's there's a large amount, sorry, I'm gonna keep the language a little cleaner, of information that you could spend all day just looking at, like saying, oh, wow, that's cool, that's great, what do I do with it? But being able to turn it back into actual action that you're applying to your music, making it actionable data, is super important. And it takes time. It takes work. There's a lot you need to dig into here. So specifically on playlists, because that was one of our main points. Again, keep your presence clean. Manage your account. These are some of the top types of playlists. The first one over there is that's like the music homepage. It shows kind of a range of what they're doing. This was actually kind of an interesting example the other day. We're working with an artist from South Africa. His name is Jeremy Loops. He's the #1 streamed South African artist, which is great and is real. So working with his team, we learned that all of a sudden that they had hired a new guy, and he's launching all these African music playlists, which, having now met the guy and had a meeting at Spotify with that team, when you go in with one artist, you can follow up a little while later and talk about other projects that might fit. So that's just, it's a nice bonus to be able to connect with people. It's funny, as I say, this is all being democratized. You are submitting music and working it on its merits. We hope you like it, and these are some of the support reasons behind it. But it never hurts to actually meet people, to actually network. These guys are music fans. They want to connect with cool artists. Going to parties at South by Southwest or at Voodoo or any kind of networking panels, that has great value. And these programmers and editors would much rather meet you guys than us guys. Because, we're behind the scenes, we're working, we believe in it, we all have great relationships, but you guys are making the music, it's cool to know you guys. So it never hurts to connect directly, and that networking is certainly, it's worth putting in the time. Just to touch on some of the points on Spotify, and you'll find this in artists, in your artist portal, is that there are 3 types of playlists here. The big kahuna are the editorial playlists that are programmed by editors. It's kind of funny, I met with a guy who's now our labor relations guy in Nashville, and we were talking about like the editors that he works with, and I was saying like, I email so-and-so who is running the hot country playlist, and I don't hear back from him very often, was my comment, and Dan, whose job it is to work with the label, said, yep, neither do I. They kind of do their own thing. The programming is a bit of a black box. Your submission goes in, people consider it. Playlisting results come out the other side. What happens in between, they kind of keep that to themselves. I'm still reminded of
making sausage.
That's what they're doing. That's like what MTV used to be. We worked on Morphine 20 years ago. Great freaking band. I was getting 1 spin a week on, what was that?
120 minutes.
120 minutes, thank you very much. I did a whole freaking Excel sheet of like, sorry guys, these are all the artists that you're spinning, these are what they're selling, and this is what my Morphine project is selling, which was a lot more, thank you. And got it up to 2 spins a week. Woohoo! And that was a big high five. But again, you kind of never know how those decisions are being made, but you just got to put the music in front of people. Playlists on Apple, not as transparent. It's not as clear what all these playlists are. You don't really get a list. But actually, the indications here, first piece is that's New Music Home. There's 3 major features of like, these are some hot artists. And right below that, next line, is here are 3 lines of playlists. Mood-based, genre-based. And that third sample, I don't know if you guys can see it, it's an interesting point, which is those are essentials playlists of specific artists. Because they're looking to kind of repackage, whoever, the Meters, the Neville Brothers, whatever, I'm sure they will once you're at a certain level as an artist, they're making an essentials playlist for you because they want to feed different ways to listen to the music. And so, if you've gotten yourself to a certain level and you've had a few albums and reached a certain level of listenership, and they haven't made an essentials playlist for you, ask about it. Talk to your distributor. If you've connected directly with somebody at Apple, never hurts to ask. That's again one of the lessons here is promote, try to make as many contacts as you can. The third image there, the one on the right, is a project that we just launched this past week. This kid, Alfie Templeman, that came out of the UK, is working with a UK label, but is somebody that our CEO just kind of found organically, reached out to before he had connected with anyone else. And 2 weeks later, there were managers and artists and agents and labels and agents kind of buzzing around him. So he signed with one of those companies in England, but he remembered that we had reached out. So they said, like, well, can you help us out in the States? And it's been great to see. Those are a top pop playlist, a top indie playlist, a couple of top alternative playlists. When they feel a buzz on a record, there are a lot of places it can go. And one thing that's gratifying there is, does that say US 8,000 and UK 4,000 spins? I think those numbers are in there. So, these are global, worldwide playlists. There's no trick to getting on these. You know, raise your profile in as many ways as you can. Network within your genre with other artists, and you know, these editors will hear about things. If things are buzzing, they want to jump on it. I do want to talk about Amazon for a minute.
Can I interrupt you for a quick second?
How am I doing on time, by the way?
Oh, we've got all night. No, we should probably you know, maybe move through it a little bit quicker. But how does a person? I mean, it seems to me that one of the essential points that you're making is that it's not good enough just to make the record, get a DistroKid or TuneCore account, and put it up there, and so the music exists on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. You've got to work it. Mm-hmm. You've got to be your own publicist. You've got to try to network. You've got to try to, as you said, work the editors. Mm-hmm. How does a person find out who these people are, and how do you get in touch with them? Is that something that you're going to find if you go to artists.spotify.com?
No. And it never has been. And the last few years that we've been kind of chasing these accounts as they've come up has been kind of random. But it's not necessary to know these guys. But it doesn't hurt if you can. I mean, that's a service that we have built out as a company. If you want to work with us, we'll help make those introductions and put the music in front of people.
But you're saying that if you do all the normal things that you're supposed to be doing as an artist, going out and touring, mm-hmm. maybe making a video and trying to get some organic traction on YouTube and that type of thing, generating a social media presence, mm-hmm. and trying to build up as many Instagram followers as you can, and that type of thing. These editors will find out about you.
So let me skip ahead here.
Okay.
I'm kind of blowing past podcasts.
Okay.
Sorry, podcasts. To this slide. You know, everything kind of goes in a circle. Streaming numbers will drive live show attendance. I book a concert series. First thing I look at is social numbers. You know, I base offers to artists on their social numbers before anything else, which happens to make sense with my audience. You know, it's an adult concert series. But you know, growing social numbers will drive press, will drive radio play. That'll drive streaming numbers. It all comes down to, you know, playing live and connecting. You know, obviously the thing in the center is the music. Sorry, I didn't get a little note. We talk about this a lot, actually, and I think it's true in other businesses as well, is you kind of never know where in the circle. You can't really jump into a circle. You can't automatically make something bigger in one place, which will then be reflected in other places. But you just have to try. You know, just if anything is happening in one place, generating the secondary effect from anything that's happening on your project is as important as that primary piece. It's great when you get that review in that one website, but then make sure you're talking about it online. Make sure you're getting your social fans to share it. It's much more likely that the people will see it that way. The message that we get from all of these companies is that please just keep doing everything and we will hear about you. And to some extent, it's real. You know, I mean, again, it doesn't hurt that we kind of have figured out how to reach these guys.
So on the playlist thing, mm-hmm. Let's talk specifically about Spotify. I'm assuming that there's, some equivalence with Apple Music. So they have, as you mentioned in one of your earlier slides, they have the curated playlist, the editorial playlist. So that's where they have what are, essentially the digital equivalent of, the radio program directors. And these are the people that make these editorial decisions. That record is going to go on this playlist, that one won't. So they're influencers. You want to try to get their attention and get them to pay attention to you and get them to add your song to the playlist. Then there's the algorithmic playlists. And one of the things that I've actually started to enjoy, which I never thought I would, lately, is if I get turned on to an artist and I start listening to them and I listen through the whole album on Spotify, at the end of the album, it will generate an automatic playlist for me to listen to of things, either other things by that artist or similar things to that artist that I might like. And I have found that it actually really works. I've discovered a whole bunch of cool stuff. If I decide that, I'm going to listen to some early 70s reggae by some obscure singer that nobody's ever heard, and I play through the entire greatest hits compilation, next thing I know, I'm hearing all these other cool early 70s reggae artists that I had never heard of before, and then I go down in more rabbit holes of what I want to hear. So that's kind of algorithmic, and it serves you stuff up just based on what you've already selected.
And if 10% of the people who are being fed those other artists are responding to it, are clicking it, are saving it, are liking it, that's going to bubble up into the system, and it's going to start flashing to the editors and saying, wow, this new reggae artist is really appealing to fans of classic reggae. You guys should lean into this a little more. Kind of the system is telling the editors that. There are these algorithmic playlists which are somewhat robot generated, but they're really kind of trying to combine those two threads. That there are some lightly edited playlists that are also semi-automated, which is kind of hard to explain. I don't really understand it, but a point about that is make sure you're submitting your music more than at least 7 days ahead of release date, because then it will go into the release radar playlist. Every Friday, I'm working with 100 bands, so every Friday I'll see a list of all right, well, these are all the folks who I've ever worked with who have released this week, which is great. The next level from there is Discover Weekly, which comes on Monday, which are those related bands. If I like Dawes, it turns out it's going to play me a lot of Jason Isbell. That's, I had a 4-hour drive last week from visiting my daughter at school. And I let a Dawes album play, and then I just wanted to see what else it was going to play me. Turned out it played me a lot of Jason Isbell, not so much Jayhawks, because they have an older audience who doesn't respond in the same way. So they're very much paying attention to how are people responding to each of these. So,
but it's still up to the individual artist to promote their song through their social media channels, through their live gigs, through trying to get newspapers, where they still exist, to write about them.
Sure.
And when they finally get that review, to blow that up on their social media and do those other things that are kind of the old school tricks of the trade that we've kind of all heard about for a long time. But the other one that you also mentioned in your slide was the personal playlists, the ones that individual people make.
Yeah.
Like I do that, if I find, going back to my reggae example, if I find that there's this obscure singer that did a version of a cool 70s pop song, I'm going to make a playlist and put that artist in it. And I may find some other cool 70s pop songs that have like a groovy rocksteady version of it, and I add those into those playlists. What I don't understand is anybody else ever going to see my playlist?
So some of these guys have decided they want to make a go of being a Spotify influencer. There are people who, for one reason or another,
So they're not on the payroll, they just want to be
they
like
just
the
want to
cool
be
kid.
cool, basically, right? Kind of in the Roots Americana world, this guy who manages this playlist called Song Picker has 35, 50,000 followers for all of his playlists. He just does it as a hobby. He's a cool guy. He wants to spread the news about artists that he likes, which is great. It's the same reason people had blogs 15 years ago. I want to talk about music I like. I'm not going to make a lot of money.
Now those people all have podcasts.
Yes, that is correct. So there are a few companies that are kind of making a business of third-party playlists. A number of them turn out to be somewhat related back to the music industry. All of the distributors have their playlisting brand. Topsify is Warner's one, and Universal has one of them as well.
So those hobbyist playlist aggregators, the cool kids,
Yeah.
you can find out who they are.
Yeah, so this is a funny thing. So that's...
And also, too, what's nice about those playlists is they stay on for a long time. Whereas some of these, very popular Spotify ones, it's great that you get on there, but you might literally be on for 1 week and you're gone. Whereas if you're on a hobbyist playlist, you could be on for quite a long period of time, which is great. You'll actually get more sometimes out of those than you do the other ones.
I've always kind of felt like, they're real.
It's music fans.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd rather. I mean, it's funny because certainly, there are some corners of the industry, and there have been articles written about this, that there is pay for play in this world, and I can get on X playlist. There's a little bit of payola there. Fine, if that exists. I'm not going to pay much attention to it because those aren't real playlists. They're not being programmed for any reason that is going to actually cause listenership.
So if for example, if I'm in New Orleans and let's say I'm a trombone player in a brass band and I want to figure out how to do all this stuff, can I Google brass, jazz, playlist and come up with 3 or 4 options of playlists that are likely going to be playing music in my bag and get a contact email for somebody that I can then hit up and say, hey, I just put out this record, would you guys consider adding us to your playlist?
So you can do a fair amount of work. There's no one straight process for that. That the second little Excel doc, what's that called? Playlisters master or something like that. That's several years' work. That's just a picture of A through AS or something like that in our research, because there's no one way to reach these guys. It actually used to be nice that you could do a search and find show me every playlist the Trombone Shorty is on. That doesn't really exist, but you can find the top ones, and again, like finding anything on the internet, if you can follow the threads, and you can find the second playlist that person made, and you can see who they follow, and you can find some other playlisters. You can do a Twitter search to find their playlisting name. You can direct message them there.
Oh, that's a good tip.
It's
LinkedIn as well works well.
So what would you search for on LinkedIn?
I just in terms of in terms of, I would use LinkedIn to find the person's contact info.
I see.
Right, in terms of sometimes you get the name of the person who's doing the playlist, but you don't know how to reach them, so you're using that to do that.
Now, if you go to the Spotify homepage, and now since they've revamped it, they have charts and they have playlists, and you can see what the popular playlists are. Will they give up the hobbyist playlists as well as their own curated playlists?
They not on the homepage,
Okay.
but within an artist search, which is really where shit happens. If you look at about on any artist on Spotify, it will show featured on X, and it will show the most popular playlists that it's on.
And if you click on that playlist, is there going to be a link somewhere that will give you a clue as to who the curator of it is?
Not anymore.
Okay.
In round one there was, and that doc that we started back in 2014 or whatever, you used to be able to reach to them directly. There used to be a system of message this other user, even send your song to this other user, and that got blown out because it was getting overused, I guess.
All right, well, here's something I've been curious about for a while. Do you remember in the early days of Facebook, and you know how, like, if you're looking at Facebook on a computer screen as opposed to on your phone, and there will be a thread on the right-hand side, or maybe it's the left-hand side, and it will say, so-and-so just liked somebody, and so-and-so just posted this, and it used to be, there was also a thing that said, somebody, so-and-so, is listening to such and such on Spotify, or on Pandora, or whatever, and that went away. It always occurred to me that if that feature still existed, then if I make a playlist, or if I'm listening to, this new Australian rock band that I just discovered and I think is the bee's knees, and all my friends see that I'm listening to that band, they might decide to click on that and want to listen to that band too. Is there anything like that kind of socializes the music listening so that all of us can actually all be influencers?
I think I still occasionally, I don't know if you've seen, I get a weird Facebook notification of so-and-so liked your activity, and it's like, oh, what activity did they like? It's like, oh, did I listen to X song?
No, it said that you were interested in going to such and such a show. That's the activity that they like now. But what about the music listening? Is that still there?
I think it's still there. I think it's hard to find. I don't think it's not as in your face as it was in those early days. I don't think it's completely disappeared. But, you making your playlist, there's no reason for you not to post that on your socials. If there's one of your social accounts where you're actually interacting with friends about music, let them hear the playlist. Maybe they want to follow you if you're going to make more playlists.
Well, I think I remember that in those early days there was, in your settings, it could say, do you want everybody to know what you're listening to on Spotify?
I don't want people knowing what I'm listening to, because there's plenty of guilty pleasures and bad songs that probably come up in my collection, right?
Well, I turned it off as well, because I'm one of these people that listens to music. If I find a song that I love, I have to listen to it 10,000 times in a
Same.
row.
Okay.
And I don't want people to know that that's the only thing I'm listening to.
But that is still live within Spotify. The column on the right, your friends and the people you follow.
But that's
you will
only if
see
they're
that
your
social
Spotify
feed.
friends, not necessarily your Facebook friends. I think.
At some point, you've connected with them.
Okay. So
I don't think you. Yeah, I do tend to follow people within Spotify just because it's kind of my job as well to understand all that. But they've certainly promoted that of follow your friends so their music can bubble up into your feed as well, and also obviously all those influencers I'll follow. But there's a setting within Spotify of do a private listening session, which if you're just playing your guilty pleasure for the 5th time, maybe you don't want that to pop up into that social feed. But it's still there. It's not a huge focus for them, but it is still there.
Okay, so to kind of, go ahead. Adam.
I was just going to say, just on the, in terms of bringing it down to a level of a self-released artist that maybe can't afford to hire a professional to do this, there are resources out there. They're not perfect. But, obviously Spotify wants you to go through their systems, but you can buy, there's a directory out there that you can buy for $9.99 online. It's Emily Williams, the Spotify directory. And she also has a blog directory. I think you can get the two of them for like $20. And they're actually good. They're actually very good. And if you want to put the time in and start researching, start emailing folks, and seeing what you can do, it's money well spent in terms of doing that. And you can try to do some stuff on your own. You can't stress enough the lead time. So many people, I get 10 calls a day, you probably do too, from people saying, my album just came out this week, or it came out last week, we want to do Spotify promotion. I'm like, well, you're too late. Not too late, but it's really about the build-up. It's about getting on all those playlists as the record's coming out, not there. So plan ahead of time.
Thing real quick. Just say again what the directories are and what kind of info they have.
You can just Google this. It's Emily Williams. I think she just calls it the Spotify directory.
And what kind of info is it going to have?
it'll have the contact info of different playlists, you know, Spotify curators, and I'm not sure if it has consumer ones in there or not, but I think
It does.
I feel like it does,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Yeah, it does. And then also too, more importantly too, Spotify in other parts of the world. You don't have to just go to Spotify US. You know, you could all of a sudden be big in Greece, right, or whatever. You know, I believe she has lots of other territories in there as well, and she also has a blog directory as well.
I mean, it's
you know.
a funny thing, and you know, I put this up there to kind of illustrate that point of this comes down to that same basic work of find people who are promoting and promulgating music like yours, and reach out to them in a friendly way and say, I appreciate that, you know, that you're featuring this kind of music. I hope you'll listen to mine. Now that doesn't mean send out generic blasts of check out my new song.
Correct.
Because that has zero or less impact. But you know, it's much more important to go through that directory, look at those playlists, appreciate that they're playing X, which is, you know, I mean, you'll see on your Spotify account artists like, you know, artists like you. Fans of my band are also listening to these artists. They're certainly worth searching. Again, it's not easy to search what playlists an artist is featured on beyond the top few. You can always search the top few, but there's a great value in searching those, and again, following those threads. And you know, listeners, you know, everything is connected to everything else. You just need to keep pinging from one step to the next, and you'll find more. And then you hire an intern to put it into an Excel spreadsheet. Or you just do the work yourself. But yeah, it's hand to hand. It's no different from when I was calling college radio 30 years ago.
Because I mean, I'm sure they still make them, but you know, some of us remember these A&R directories that were commercially available. You know, for the same $20, you can buy, you know, a listing and say who all the A&R reps are at all the different labels. So now they have the same thing for the
That's
streaming
right.
services.
And the thing to remember too is as the person making the music, you are the rights holder. You own that music. That's really who Spotify wants to deal with. They don't really want to hear from a third-party company pitching. I mean, John's pitching records, but most of them you have a stake in, I would say, right? So, whereas, you know, be wary of a company of, you know, there's definitely some shady folks online that are selling their services to pitch you to Spotify, but unless you're the rights holder, unless you're either the artist or the label or maybe the publisher, you know, they're not really, they don't want to deal with you. They want to deal direct. They don't want the third. They're trying to avoid the mistake that radio, I think, made years ago with dealing with third party and payola and, you know, $20 and $100 inside the 45 type of shit, right? So
those are fun days.
Yeah. So I mean, I just, you know, just be aware of that. I mean, there are companies that you can hire that do promotion to those playlists that are done by consumers, for sure.
I saw something in a piece in an article this week. I was researching a company that said there are 12,000 playlists that they're tracking, and this is one of those kind of A&R research companies of like, we identify the hits first. 12,000 playlists, each with more than 10,000 followers. And you know, if you've taken the time to get 10,000 followers for your own managed playlist, you have a well understood and well appreciated musical point of view, and I want to reach you. You know, I as somebody whose business is marketing music, and again, I'm not gonna, you know, it's a funny thing because as head of digital for my company, there are a lot of things I am not putting into the company's database because I'm kind of keeping those contacts for myself. I don't want every publicist hitting these guys. I don't want these guys put on mailing lists, you know, so they're going to get 2 things a day from one of our 10 people. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want these guys to know that when they hear from us, it's real. And I have considered why, because they've so loved Jason Isbell, my artist who may tour with Jason Isbell, and I'm just making this up, should be considered for placements similar to that.
And of course, the underlying theme here that we haven't really articulated, but I'm sure all of the musicians in the room are thinking, are you kidding me? When am I going to find the time to be able to dig through and find these names and find these people and hit them up with all of this stuff? I mean, I got a gig tonight, and then I got a rehearsal tomorrow.
So that's why all the other things are so important. You can't, so many people just think that Spotify is the be-all, end-all. That's why, as going back to John's graphic there of the circle, that's why all the other things are so important. That's why press is still important, online PR and radio and touring and all the other things. Because Spotify's algorithms picks up on that and it pulls up. It's a pyramid, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the more other things you're doing, the better. And if you're not doing all those other things and you do somehow get on a playlist, you're going to be off that playlist pretty quick too. They know the data within 72 hours, right? So you've got to be doing all of those things. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and you still have to do all the other things too.
But this has always been true. Because
no problem.
Now we're dealing with a new format. We've got these streaming services. In 5 years, there will be something else that we'll be having a panel talking about that will be the new platform that everybody wants to figure out how to get on. But this goes back, at least 30 years. We've been having similar discussions where, okay, I'm an artist, I put out this record, I put my heart and soul into it, I pressed up all these copies, and now I'm trying to hustle gigs in my town and around the country and everywhere else to try to promote my music. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, I also have to work press? I also have to work radio? I also have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this, I have to do... But that's always been true. Everybody has always had to try to check off all of those other boxes. And some people are able to find the stamina and the discipline to actually put in that legwork in front of a computer or whatever it may be, or on the telephone back in the day.
Well, for a new artist, some things are easier to pop out of, too, right? I mean, you could make an argument that you might be able to, you could get something going on online, on the online blogs, easier than getting a bunch of playlists. And if you do start getting a bunch of online blogs, that will often lead to a bunch of playlists, because a lot of those bloggers have playlists, right? So why not start there? Or why not start at specialty radio or non-com radio or college radio? They all lead to each other. And so you don't always have to do everything at once. You just have to do all of it kind of eventually in the picture. And I think there are easier ways than just trying to start cold at Spotify. I don't think you should start cold at Spotify.
I mean, we're talking a lot about them because they're very visible. They were the first company to kind of blow out this new business model, blow out in a positive way. And they've created all these tools. But, if Jen Messé, who kind of runs in independent label relations, were here, she would say, please do not go deep into working Spotify. Please go wide across all platforms, all those other points on the circle, and pull your music up through all those other places, and make sure you've submitted it. Make sure your presence is clean and up to date, and make sure you've told us that story. But then we got it from there. We'll find it. If you're happening, we're going to notice you, and we're going to feature you more, and we're going to lean into your projects. And I mean, it's a funny thing. You kind of, when something is really going to work. When people, I mean, that Alfie Templeman kid from the UK, it was clear on Friday when we released that single that people are going for this. People are really psyched about this. So you can do all the work and all the pitching and hit that entire list, and send all those wonderfully crafted pitches that I'm telling you to do to all those people. But if nothing else is happening, you're wasting the effort. I mean, for all those 30 years that we've been having that conversation, my point, as the guy who helps once, essentially once there's a master, is please consider the same amount of time and or the same amount of investment to come afterwards to make sure people are actually hearing it. And that's as important. I mean, my first job, we made a video and we spent, we were a little label. We spent 20 grand to make a video, and then they wouldn't give me the budget to make the dupes to send it to people. It's like, guys, come on. You have to consider the whole spectrum of what you're doing, and not just, I've created this, here world, please enjoy.
Right. All right. This is all good stuff, and I have a feeling that we're never going to get to all of the info that we want to touch on. But let's talk about radio. We kind of brushed aside the podcasts. We'll have to come back and talk about that either another day or at midnight when we're all still here. But
there it is.
Adam, you've been following this whole conversation, and we asked you to come because radio is still something that you specialize in, and it's still a mystery to a lot of people. And like I said at the beginning, I often wonder, does it even matter anymore? Because it seems that if you're in your car and you spin the dial, you basically get top 40, or you basically get today's hottest hip hop, and well, what about me? I put out an independent record. How am I supposed to get on the radio?
So don't spin right, spin to the left, right? So the good radio is on the left of the dial, the crap radio is on the right of the dial, as a basic rule. Listen, radio is still very important. And even, just to stick up for commercial radio for a minute, commercial radio is still the difference between a hit and a massive hit, right? It really is very effective of making massive records. But for independent music, new artists, there's still great places to go. Listen, hello, we're on a legendary station right now, right? What a pleasure it is to be on WWOZ, right? Legendary station. And every city's got a station like that. And people listen to that station. And, there are outlets within those stations for every type of new music, whether it is blues or Americana or EDM. There's 100 stations out there that have EDM specialty shows, that have hip hop shows, new music hip hop, not commercial hip hop. There's 100 stations out there that play heavy metal. WSOU in New York, still very influential station, playing heavy metal all the time. They have a specialty show for new music, for mellow music, which is great, right? So yeah, it's completely opposite. It's not sexy. Radio's not sexy. It's not the new shiny thing, right? But there's different types of radio, and the college stations, the non-commercial stations, what they call non-coms, and new music shows on commercial radio, still great ways of getting the ball rolling. If you look at a station like a KEXP in Seattle, fantastic station, has a massive online listenership around the world. There's no band from anywhere in the world that I've met that hasn't asked me how to get on KEXP. And they drive a lot of traffic through their YouTube channel, obviously. KCRW in Los Angeles, again, they're kind of the biggest of the non-com stations out there. But you get WMNF in Tampa, WERS in Boston. Well, actually, ERS kind of stinks. But most major cities have one or two great stations, and then a bunch of other smaller ones. And it's still a great place to start. Still a great place to be able to compete as a brand new artist. Because at the end of the day, the college stations don't care about any of the, Spotify wants the story. College radio doesn't care, they just want the music, right? So just give me the music. I don't care how many likes you have. I don't care how many plays you have. I don't care if your record is even out or not. If I like it, they're going to play it, right? So it can be a great place to start. You start getting airplay on a bunch of those stations. Now there's some markets that you can start playing that are outside of your home area. Now you've got something to kind of talk about and build that story. If you can start doing shows in some of those other markets, now it makes sense to kind of go after some press in those markets. You can start building it slowly, right, as for a new artist. So still very supportive place to start.
But as an independent artist, the way to attack this format, is it still also kind of the same thing? Like, top 10 non-commercial radio stations in the Northeast, and you Google that and you find what the radio stations are, and you go to their website, and maybe there's a contact link,
Right.
and you say, hey, we just put out this great record that's right in your whatever format, and just send it to them and just work it the same way that you would a playlist editor or a newspaper reporter.
You can totally do that. I mean, you can do it. I love when people do it themselves, because then they'll call me on the next record. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's kind of how it works. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And there are 300 plus reporting stations in the college non-com arena, right? So
Reporting to the trade publications.
yeah, in terms of reporting to the trades, right? So that used to be CMJ, that went away. It's now called NAC. The NAC chart tracks college radio, community radio, non-com, online, even CBC reports in there. A lot of these low-power FMs that are everywhere. It's a really good overview of kind of what's happening out there, and we get more data and more information than we ever used to get. It's actually a problem. We get too much information. We can tell exactly how many spins we're getting and where and all of that, and it's a really good chart, and it's yeah. So but you can, if you're a band from New Orleans, then you could just say, hey, I'm just going to send it out to, the 40 stations that are in the southeast, Gulf area or something, right? You can do that, and you could do that yourself, and you could do the research and whatnot.
You can just say, what's the best college station in Birmingham?
Yeah, you could totally do that. I'm not a huge fan of doing that. I think I'm more of a bigger fan of sending it out nationwide, even if you're not going to play those markets anytime soon, because the more stations you send to, the better chance you have of charting on the overall chart. And even if you're not getting, you used to always do a regional campaign because you weren't going to be playing in Seattle anytime soon if you were from Miami, right? So why send it? Why get airplay there? Now, a fan is a fan anywhere, right? A fan in Seattle is worth the same as a fan in Miami, because they can find you online, they can follow you on Facebook, they can stream you on Spotify, they can find your music online, whereas before they couldn't, because they couldn't find it in the stores. So I'm a bigger fan of sending it out nationwide so that you have a chance of charting on the national chart. And then
Again, it still means doing the legwork, sending those individual emails to that list of however many people. It might be 200 people that you need to make a personalized appeal to.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to follow up. You can't just mail it and just, you will get some airplay if you just mail it. But if you really want to do a campaign, you've got to follow up every week. That's why I have 5 people on my staff that's all they do is call radio stations every week to twist arms, to get people to listen to the music quickly, get it into the systems, get the different DJs playing it and whatnot. That's what you're up against when you're doing it yourself. But college radio is pretty inexpensive compared to other areas of promotion, so that's why a lot of bands will start there in terms of doing a campaign.
A couple of quick questions as far as radio. Okay, so if you're going to pitch to radio, can you send a SoundCloud link? Can you send an MP3, or do you need to mail a CD?
So it varies. So I wouldn't send an MP3. You generally want to have slightly higher quality if you can. You will get some airplay, with some dialogue back and forth from emailing the people from sending digital files. We actually still send hard copies on all of our priority releases, which I know sounds crazy, but it cuts through the clutter.
So like the whole panel?
To the whole panel, 300 CDs out every Friday to people.
Make sure the CD has a spine.
So that's yeah. So I know that sounds crazy. So it depends on the format, right? So
that's a lot of
work.
Stamps. It's a lot of postage.
It's a lot of postage, right? To mail out 300 CDs is going to cost you at least $900, because package is going to run you about $3 a package to mail out, if not more. You can do it. I do digital-only campaigns because the stations are familiar with our website and our emails, and so they have a password to our back end, so they can download digital-only campaigns. So, we do that, but we find we get like 35, 40% more airplay if we send out hard copies. So that's why we do it. And the reason is a lot of these stations are volunteer-run, listener-supported. It's radio. It sounds great on the air. Don't look behind the curtain because the equipment is held together with chewing gum and paper clips, and it's fallen apart and it's antiquated. They've also got massive libraries with massive amounts of music. They've also got 30, 40, 50 or more DJs. Some of them are older as well. They like CDs. And it's just as simple as coming into the studio and there's shelves on the studio wall there, and the CDs are on the wall, and people see the CD, they grab it and they play it more often. Digital tends at radio, at the non-college radio, digital tends to get forgotten. It's out of sight. Whereas the CD, people grab it. Okay, now, but the larger non-com stations, so your KCRWs, your KEXPs and whatnot, on those, you do a digital campaign, and then sometimes, especially with new artists, you'll send a CD as kind of a backup, but it's really a digital format.
So in assuming that, your typical independent artist can't afford to spend $900 just on postage, let alone pressing up CDs, is it to their advantage to maybe post a WAV file as opposed to an MP3 on their website?
Well,
and,
I would
and send a link to that.
Yeah, you would send a link. I mean, I would send a streaming link and then a download. If you like and you want to hear more, right? There's ways of doing this too. Like, you don't have to send 300 CDs out. You can cherry pick and send to the 150 best stations or something like that, and then do the rest digital. You don't have to do full artwork. I don't need the booklet anymore. But funny enough, the spine, as John mentions, is actually really worthwhile. Like, don't do paper sleeves or cardboard sleeves.
Because you can't see them in a
Because
pile.
you can't see the record in the pile. And if they can't find the record, they can't play the record. I mean, I know it sounds absurd, but a generic tray card with no artwork CD will help you so much. And those are really cheap to do. And we actually make those for clients all the time now.
All right, another question. Is it still true that none of these stations, college, non-commercial, whatever, will play your song if it isn't properly registered with ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC?
Oh, I don't think that's true. I think they'll play anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they know that. I think that you're not going to get a lot of money from any of those organizations on getting airplay on those stations. It's so inconsistent. I mean, I'll get clients, call me out, oh, I got a check for, $90, and they're so happy, or I got a check for $11, and they're still happy, not quite as happy. But, it's very inconsistent, because the stations, because they're an educational license, they're paying a much reduced royalty fee to ASCAP on that. But no, I don't think they don't ask that. I've never been asked by a programmer at those stations what PRO company they're registered with. They don't care. They like the music. They play the music. That's what's so great about the format. So that's why it's a supportive place to start building, even if it's just your hometown station. Like, why overlook that, right? I mean, start it slow. You don't have to, if you're only just getting going locally, there's no reason to send your record out nationwide, right? So, start locally, but at a certain point, grow it and try to grow it out. But, and try to do some regional touring and regional stations or whatever. But, these people, even if your thesis of radio doesn't matter anymore and no one's listening, all right, even so, you say that's true. There's still 30 people at that station that are music freaks. And you want to get those people excited about your band, because those people are going out to the shows, and they all have their own blogs, and they're also all on Spotify, and they're all on social media, and they're going to shows, and they're telling their friends. The way I look at college radio is you've got 300 cool kids all across the country that I want to get talking about my band. And then hopefully that grows, and then hopefully they're playing it on their station, and hopefully people are hearing it on their station as well, and then so on, and then so on.
They're doing the Spotify playlist too, by the way. Those programmers. There's also, frankly, a podcast. Like, there's a KEXP Song of the Week podcast. There's a KCRW Daily Download or something like that, right? And
the Current in Mississippi does one as well. Yep.
Right. So,
All right, well, let's,
All ties
as
together.
far as radio is concerned, let's talk about what I consider to be the big kahuna, which is NPR.
Yep.
Because they have a whole bunch of different music programs that have benefited so many artists. I mean, most famously, probably here in New Orleans, Tank and the Bangers, really blew up because they not only got on Tiny Desk, but they won the Tiny Desk contest. But they might do the New Music Fridays, and they will play these weird esoteric records that most people haven't heard of, but they're geeking out about it, and lots of people hear about stuff that way. So is there anything different or anything magical about trying to pitch to any of the various programs on NPR?
Well, so think about who's playing the NPR feed. It's not NPR stations, even though they are NPR stations. They're non-com stations, right? It's KCRW. It's it's so many of those. There's so much overlap within the two. I mean, a lot of the NPR.
Well, I listen to them as podcasts.
Right.
On my phone in the car.
So the funny thing about NPR for me is I don't really deal with NPR. It's always been done by the publicists, right? So I mean that's kind of changing, but it's never been. I deal with the stations that are playing enough music that are NPR stations that are playing enough of their new music, as opposed to just playing jazz or classical or whatnot. But
it's funny the way everything overlaps, and I mean, our company was started to be the PR company that could get into all of those NPR programs because my friend who started the company was running marketing for Razor and Tie and for Artemis, and always wanted to hire that company. Like who has really good connections? And at the time, Bob Boylan was a producer on All Things Considered, and they let him do his little music thing on the side. But it was clear that was moving the needle. So that's evolved to where publicists are reaching out, people whose job is PR. Radio promotion companies are reaching out to some, I mean, Bruce Warren probably hears from 4 different types of music promoters with, I mean, he's an influential online programmer, so, my digital teams also need to know him. He's the program director,
XPN.
GM or something like that of WXPN in Philadelphia. He's also a writer for NPR Music. He helps program the World Cafe, a certain channel of that. So there's so much overlap, and it kind of goes back to the original point I made, which is it's all the same work of just reaching influential people who are helping spread the word about music, and however you categorize what you're doing.
Right,
they're also different too. I mean, if you compare, a KXP to a XPN, they're both, a non-com station, right, under that umbrella. KXP is going much more rock. XPN is definitely going a little bit, I think, older, I think I would, call it, and then you got the Current in Minnesota, which is kind of down the middle, because it's in the Midwest, I guess. But, it's those are the type of stations that we deal with as opposed to dealing with, the NPR, proper. Another thing I wanted to bring up too is about Spotify is, I mean, I get 1 million calls from bands that do get on a playlist, and they got 1 million plays in the last 2 weeks or whatever. But they've got 400 Facebook likes. And that's the disconnect, right? And that's where the promotion comes into play in terms of doing, John's big picture thing. Because I do, as great as Spotify is, and I'm a big fan of it, it is sometimes passive in that, I kind of sometimes call it, music for hipsters, right? In that it's, I listen to playlists all the time. I know I know who the first 5 to 10 songs are that played because I'm actively looking, but then I get distracted and then I'm doing something else and I played the whole playlist. The artists get credit for those plays. I have no idea what I just heard. So how many of those 1 million plays are actually known, right? And so that's kind of where the promotion kind of also comes into play. So yeah, just wanted to make that point that don't kid yourself with your plays on how many plays you have in total.
You can have, there are certain genres where you can get 2 million plays in the first couple of weeks and be completely faceless. And a good friend of mine is now working at Apple, and we were talking about this the other day. And it's up to somebody who's getting 2 million plays has a team. He's not doing it himself, and it's up to that team to kind of build the rest of that face around that, or else you're here today and then you're gone again, and there's no actual benefit. I mean, as I mentioned, as a concert booker, I'm paying more attention to social numbers than to streams. Streams does not drive concert attendance in the same way that social numbers do.
So, a quick anecdote of my own kind of recent, like a classic artist discovery kind of thing in the newfangled era. I'm listening to the New Music Friday podcast on my phone, in my car, an NPR thing, just because I wanted to see what their podcast was all about. And about half an hour into it, they play an artist from Australia that I have never heard of, even though apparently she's quite popular there, Tash Sultana.
Yeah, you're late on that. You're about a year late on
I
that.
know.
Just so
I've
you know.
never heard of her. So,
You should be listening to college radio.
But and it turns out, so she's a solo performer. Turns out her stuff is kind of reggae, and I'm into reggae. So I'm like, oh, well, this one's cool. And they say, well, what you really should do, instead of just listening to this record, you should really watch the video of her performance on Tiny Desk, because she plays solo and does all these loops and things, and she's a very dynamic performer, and it's great to watch her work. So I do. And I watch the video, like, oh, this is cool. Okay, I really like her. So then I fire up the Spotify. I want to listen to her. And then, after I make it all the way through the album, if you like this artist, you might also like such and such. And there's a list of 10 or 15 other bands that are loosely related, probably because they're all Australian.
Sure.
4 or 5 down the list, oh, those 2 guys are sitting by the beach. That looks cool. No idea who they are. Turns out to be a band called Lime Cordiale. First song on their list blows my mind. Love it, fall into the rabbit hole, listen to everything that's ever been recorded by these guys, and now I'm a super fan, right? Even though they're in Australia and they may never play the States in the next 3 years, who knows? But my question was, so that's kind of like how all of these things can kind of interweave, but what I really was curious about, talking about Spotify, if I'm an independent band in New Orleans, how do I get listed in the, well, if you like Trombone Shorty, or if you like Tank and the Bangers, or if you like this and you like that, if you like, I don't know, Cowboy Mouth, you might also like, and how do I get my band in there? Is there anything that a person can do about that, or is that strictly up to the algorithm?
There is no shame in asking your fans to help promote. And, if you're playing our album and then play Trombone Shorty, I mean, this is something you can post through your socials, on your website. It would be great if you played Trombone Shorty and then played us, because again, the robots notice these things. They know all, and how much they are going to analyze the data is the factor. But if all of a sudden 20 people are interacting with those 2 bands together, that's going to bubble up.
Because it used to be that back in the day, like what, 3 years ago, you could actually send an email to somebody at Pandora and said, can I, get on that Joni Mitchell algorithm? Or you've got my stuff on the Joni Mitchell thing, thank you very much, but I'm actually much more like Bob Dylan. Can you get me on the Bob Dylan, radio station or something like that? So there was a time, I don't know if you still can, where you could actually contact somebody, ask that question, and they may even do what you ask. Yeah. Is there a way to do something like that with the Spotifys of the world?
You can ask those specific questions. To your Pandora example, there's a tool like that in that AMP Pandora thing. But in general, no. It's hard to actually make those asks because, they don't want to post an email address that 20,000 artists are going to find, and start pinging it with requests. They'd rather, they've set up these, somewhat harder processes kind of as gates. And if you're an artist who can figure out how to get around those gates, they want to know you. Because you're not gonna just be doing it with them, you're gonna be working it with your fans as well. And they're looking for people who are working and who are figuring out how to get their music into different places. So those are kind of that difficult process is designed with a purpose, that they want to create a bit of that filter.
Okay.
I was only giving you a hard time on Tash Sultana. Her record only actually just came out, but she did it through social media and through touring. I mean, that's been an amazing story for about 18 months now out of Australia with her, touring Europe, word of mouth, and it took off. The Lime Cordiale has been a much slower slog, and that's probably been a good 4+ years
They've
on
been around
them.
for like 9 years, but only just put out their first record, their first album.
Yeah,
they've had one
had
single
some,
a year for 8
that's,
years.
Yeah,
now,
well,
just
They're sitting on the beach.
and we've had some EPs. They've come over to the U.S. a couple times now, and they've done a couple of West Coast tours and played South by, and they've been putting the time in. And then also they were unknown in Australia as well, so they had to put the time in there. And now they've just become a great live band, and they're doing the numbers in Australia, and they'll, hopefully they'll come back to the U.S. and put some more time in. But yeah,
All right, well,
overnight success, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's 5-year overnight success. It just is what it is. I mean, I was cleaning my desk the other day, and I found a postcard from 2011, I think it was, and it was from Portugal the Man thanking us for all the work we did with their #1 record at college radio. And I went, well, that's 7 years later, they had a real number one
7
record.
years later, they were a new artist breakthrough.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
All right, so were there any other points either on radio or any of the other topics that we were ostensibly going to cover that we haven't gotten a chance to make yet?
I think the other good thing about non-commercial radio, where and I use non-commercial radio as a broad term of all the different types of community, non-com, college, et cetera. What's great about it still, and commercial specialty new music shows too. What's great about it is it is someone there curating that music for you, and that's still a wonderful thing. And the
It's not an algorithm.
Right, algorithms are great. They're getting better. Every once in a while, you'll get something, you'll go, what? But generally, they're pretty good. But having a real person there curating, there's nothing better than that, right? And it's a trusted source. And I think that there is a place for that. I think people do still want that to an extent. And the other thing that excites me with radio as well is as the digital dashboard gets more and more prevalent in cars and on your phone and on your app. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, and I listen to Boston radio all the time on my phone. Right, and so you can stream this station that we're on right now anywhere in the world, right? And so that's great, and I think there's more and more of that. And also, as the stations are streaming their music, we're now getting that data because it's being streamed, and there's now a company that gets all that data and is making a college radio. There's a college radio app for all the college radio stations now, so they can get all that data, and we can see in real time who's getting played and when. So I still think radio has a place. It's not the shiny new thing, but it's still a great place.
So I'll make one point about podcasts, which we've kind of blown out. It was first on the list, but whatever. But it's such a wide range of things. It's distributed audio through the internet. It can be somebody playing music. It can be a chat show. Obviously, comedy is huge. Podcasting, by and large, is a pretty white medium, for what that's worth.
Joe Budden would not agree.
Exception to prove the rule. But, to your question that you were asking 10 minutes ago about how do I find these people and how do I find those people, you can find podcasters. If there's, and again, don't work the whole list. Find one that you think is cool, find one that you listen to, and understand what your pitch is to them. I have a cultural criticism podcast I've always been a fan of. It's the Slate Culture Gabfest, right? It's 3 esoteric, intellectual people talking pretty high-level cultural criticism about pretty medium-level culture. They'll talk a lot about Taylor Swift. They'll talk about all the Netflix things. I've just always been a fan. I sent an email to info@at that podcast and said, I would love to pitch you Roseanne Cash to be on your podcast. And 3 months later, they responded like, oh my God, really? Not the next day, 3 months later. And they were, the title of that show was, oh my God, it's Roseanne Cash. It's just because I reached out, and I'm a fan of that podcast, and I could articulate why she would be a good fit to be on there. They didn't really do a lot of music programming, but if you can come up with something that's a fit, again, no shame in just
That
asking.
actually gives me hope in a weird kind of way, because how many people here made a record 3 years ago that they think is over, and they're thinking about the next record, but you could still probably pitch a podcast person,
Sure.
Hey, there's this record. They don't need to know how old it is. And you can, if you can spend the time finding the
new
people.
to you.
Right.
20 years ago, 10 years ago, we were working records for a year, 18 months, 2 years. Now everything is, so sped up, and the day the record comes out, it's over, and, blah, blah, blah. But, why not? Yeah, absolutely. Find new ways to promote it, to breathe new life into the record.
Well, the thing that I'm constantly struck by is, we do these types of panels, we do these workshops once a month, we talk about all these different topics, whether it's how much should I spend on a music video, or, what should my band website look like, or, how do you get on a podcast or on a playlist or on the radio? It's all a lot of work. Getting any one of these things to happen is a lot of work. And so really, it just goes to show you that if you want to be in this game, you've got to be willing to spend the time to find the resources, take advantage of learning about what some of these other things are from stuff like this, but you've got to go back and you've got to put in the legwork to get any of this stuff to actually work.
Yeah, definitely on the local level, and you can do it yourself on the local and regional level. And then as you are build your team. It's always a good idea to do some of the promotion yourself in the beginning, because then the questions to ask as you're hiring people to come on board. But build your team. There's some things that make sense to outsource, and some things that you can do yourself. And trying to do radio, trying to reach out to 300 stations every single week, or 100 stations every single week, that's a full-time job. You're not going to be writing songs or booking shows or doing anything else if you're trying to do a radio campaign yourself. So be honest with yourself about what you can handle and what you can't. And, if you're going to spend all the money, make all the effort, take all the time to make a record, don't be in a rush to get it out. Sit on it for 6 months if you have to, so you can save some more money up, so you can hire people to be on board with you. Otherwise, so many people just, I got an email. I've gotten emails all week this week saying my record's coming out December, 18th. I'm like, are you insane? Like, what are you talking about? Or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Or my record's coming out next week. And it's like, no, hire a professional if you don't know what you're doing, or at least get one to consult with you or something, right? But factor that into the budget. You probably just spent a couple grand recording it, or more, and then mastering it and whatever. Factor in some money for promotion and marketing so someone can help you on that.
And in terms of real world tactics, this is a very interesting time in that I'm working more and more with folks to go single album. Our press team, we have a larger press team than digital team, and they will point out, I need to talk about the album, I need to say it's coming, and I'm gonna say, yes, but I need to work track by track. I need to put this track out. It's gonna take me 2 or 3 songs to reach everybody sometimes. Hopefully I have reached them. Hopefully they're supporting it. They've at least listened to it. I lead horses to water. That's what we do. We make sure they get a taste of it, and then if they keep drinking it, that's great. But, in 2018, 2019, you're not looking for your first week album sales. That's not the metric right now. It's how many people have I reached over the last 3 years that I've been working the record. It's funny, and stressing out about this and talking to a lot of colleagues and peers about, there's no system to communicate with Spotify. Again, the Spotify system, once a record is set up to be released, I can communicate with Spotify officially about it. There's the official submit button. The minute it comes out, that submit button disappears. That communicate with the Spotify team button disappears. Hopefully you've developed a relationship with the label relations team, whose job it is to keep paying attention and feed that back in. But the feedback that Spotify is getting from all of us who do this for a living is you have to keep those lines of communication open. Look, if Adam feeds in an ad on KCRW for this project, I need to send that back to somebody. Like, look, this is going to be happening. They'll say, oh, we'll hear about it organically, it's fine. But, it's better for them as well as me if they know about it, that it's coming. Because all of a sudden, they're going to be getting more demand for the project, and they simply should meet their listeners' needs better by knowing about that in advance and kind of having it queued in similar places.
And hopefully you will have not only led the horse to water, but they will also drink the Kool-Aid.
That's what I'm counting on.
All right, well, we have been at this for over 100 minutes now, so unfortunately, we have run out of time for audience questions, but Adam and John will be here for a little while if anybody has any specific things that they want to ask them about. But in the meantime, I would just like to thank both of you, John Hammond from the Missing Piece Group and Adam Lewis from the Planetary Group, coming in from New Jersey, coming in from LA, all the way here to New Orleans to the Jazz and Heritage Center to come and talk to all of us about how to try to tame this wild beast of the music business that is an endless challenge. And I just want to thank both of you for being here and for being part of Sync Up. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Yeah.